Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So, surprise, surprise, the Reading stabbing attack suspect, as in the person who was detained at the scene with a weapon, recorded multiple times as well, but suspect, Khairi Saadallah, was known to MI5. Yes, he was one of the 40,000 people on the suspect list. At this point, I mean, obviously we think that MI5 is great, and obviously, the James Bond films show MI5 and MI6 especially being international as top-notch, fantastic security departments, and we've seen their great work in previous wars in decades past, that they're clearly very good at what they do. Except for now, when it comes to terror suspects, particularly, of course, when they're foreign, they seem to be lackluster. Now, we're not sure if it is them in particular, or if it is other people who are responding on their advice that wish to toe the so-called politically correct line, or if it is them themselves. And, of course, when it comes to anything that is so-called politically correct, I think we're seeing more and more that so-called politically correct is very much politically incorrect. So, the man held on suspicion of killing 3 people, as tenuous as you could get. I mean, when it comes to Derek Chauvin and George Floyd, it was clearly Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd. No, he hasn't actually been convicted yet, but that's how they're going to report it, because white man bad. But foreign man, good. On suspicion of killing 3 people at a park in Reading, was known to MI5, security sources say. And that is another string to the bow. Khairi Saadallah, 25, from the town. Such a beautiful British name, as somebody would say. Khairi Saadallah. Yes, that's what I'm going to call my son. Was arrested on Saturday, and police said they are not looking for anyone else over the terror incident. Yes, they have now called this a terror incident at long last. So the motive has apparently now become clear, and the idea wasn't that it was just a free-for-all and it was an individual thinking, I've had enough of life and I wish to take it out on other people before myself dying, perhaps suicide by cop, but instead I wish to incite terror in other people. With a name like that, Khairi Saadallah, I don't think I really have to dig in deep as to where his motives came from. Of course, having done so, it is immediately apparent that was basically a waste of time. But it's exactly what you think. It's exactly the religion that we can't mention on YouTube. So sources told the BBC he was originally from Libya and came to the attention of MI5 in 2019. So yes, Khairi Saadallah, 25, from the town in Reading, was originally from Libya. I don't understand how he is from the town. And then he was living there at the time. Just the way they manipulate information is laughable. That we can see why defund the BBC is such a strong narrative at this point. That when they mention things like this, like, come on guys, I mean, I only use the BBC because I know that they're going to misrepresent the facts as much as they can, and I'm going to disagree with them, but I want some form of an argument against my point, so I can try and give the best possible or accurate representation of the facts that have happened, so I can basically use their points, so you understand what the opposition is saying, if you will, what the liars say, and then I can give you the truth as well, so that you know what most people are hearing, while also understanding what the truth of the matter is. So, one of the victims has been named James Furlong, described by his family as a wonderful man. Well, that is always the case, and yes, by all means, perhaps this gentleman was a wonderful man, but I wouldn't buy into that much, because when was the last time you read about somebody who died and just everybody said he had it coming to him? He was a terrible person. I'm glad he's dead. It doesn't happen. So, obviously, that's not going to be the case here. But PM Boris Johnson said he was appalled and sickened by the attack in Forbury Gardens on Saturday evening. As of yet, he hasn't actually done anything concrete about it, although we will get into a tiny bit more detail with regards to releasing terrorists early, as of course we know in regards to the London Tower Bridge incident. The later one, not the earlier one. I know there are too many to choose from when it comes to recent terror attacks in the UK, but we're going to go with the more recent one. So, Counter-Terrorism Policing South East, CTSPE, said a 25-year-old man from Reading, spoilers, he was not from Reading, he was from Libya, was arrested initially on suspicion of murder on Saturday and has now been re-arrested under Section 41 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Now, the Terrorism Act 2000 is quite large, encompassing. Of course, we saw the far-right leader of Britain First arrested on a terrorist charge because he didn't want to turn over his phone to police on a spot check. And Lawrence Southern was, of course, detained on the same Terrorist Act 2000 charge for saying that Allah is gay, because, of course, people are saying Jesus is gay. So this is very wide encompassing and includes far too many things. But in this regard, given that the man has killed 3 people and resulted in hospitalization of 3 more, I think it's fair to conclude that this was probably a fair arrest under the Terrorism Act 2000. So security sources said the suspect came to the attention of the security services after they received information he had aspirations to travel abroad, potentially for terrorism. Almost certainly. According to the BBC's Home Affairs correspondent Dominic Cassian. Well done, Kortahaya. When the information was further investigated, as the first stage of looking into a potential lead, no genuine threat or immediate risk was identified. Seems like he did a shit job then. No case file was opened. Again, a shit job then, which would have made him a target for further investigation. And here we have James Furlong, one of the victims. Mr. Basu, Neil Basu, the Metropolitan Police Assistant Commissioner, said they are not looking for anyone else in connection with the attacks. He was a lone wolf, if you will. Basically just got radicalized by the information that was available, basically saying that the West is a bad place, like the BBC likes to do, and then from there went to more left-leaning information places, suggesting that anyone who tries to take down the West is a good person, and therefore then leads them into more radical circles of what can be a good thing, basically just like the New York Times suggested. Because, if you remember, they were trying to say that Mr. Kane, gentleman, that he was radicalized by the far right, except, of course, if you read the article, then he looked into things, found some sense, and then YouTube tried to pull him out of sense and pushed him much towards left-wing radicalism, which is where he ended up. So basically he was pulled out of sensibleness and ideas that were useful and helpful and would have made him a better person, just to make him indoctrinated, and that is what the conclusion was of the New York Times article, but they wished to frame it in a way of saying that they were radicalized to the far right. Fake news at its finest. So, as I say, Saturday's horrific killings may be another example of what security chiefs call a lone actor attack, where a single individual turns extremist beliefs into murderous actions. By extremist beliefs, they mean that a just literal interpretation of the Quran. When they say strike the infidels at the neck where you find them, that's it's quite an obvious understanding, to be quite frank. So this person doesn't believe in Allah. Let me kill them. Why would you do that? Have you read the Quran? No, but I've heard some apologetics. Read the Quran. Oh, it makes sense. Go ahead then, because that's what we have in a tolerant Western society, because don't you know, to be intolerant to intolerance is just intolerance. Definitely isn't a cornerstone of what is required for a functioning civil society. As many great philosophers have said previously, we must ignore all their great work and suggest that we know that clearly we have more knowledge than previous generations, and we are wiser than future generations. We are clearly the pinnacle of information at present. I don't realise that you wouldn't get where you were if you weren't already standing on the shoulders of giants, and to suggest that you know more than anybody ever will is grossly narcissistic. So, as they go on to say, that their superintendent, Kath Barnes, said the investigation continues to move at a fast pace, as the suspect was arrested within 5 minutes of the emergency call made to police, and the number of officers were quickly on the scene, she confirmed. The response time used to be 2 to 7 minutes, until they realised that they didn't have enough police responding to on-the-ground emergencies because they were too busy policing Twitter, and then they increased it to 8 to 15 minutes. So 5 minutes, wow, that's a bloody good response time. Except you think, okay, busy area, person with a knife, very easy to kill people. slice the trachea, for example, or you could go for the esophagus if you wish. But anywhere on the neck is most likely to be fatal, and it's quite an obvious, easy, soft target as well. That's why the old saber-toothed tigers had their particular fang in order to clamp down around somebody's head in order to sever the trachea. Okay, you got 5 minutes in a densely packed area. You could kill more than 3 people, provided that you knew how to use the knife, which is just as well that these Middle Eastern terrorists are utter idiots, because if they had any semblance of intelligence, I mean, obviously, for one, they wouldn't be terrorists, but if they were to continue with it and actually try to do something sensible in their mass killing sprees, then they would result in killing a lot more people, which is probably why we see white mass shooters kill a load more people. They just seem to be more capable, and for once, that's actually not a good thing. Let's not get drawn into the IQ differences between race, especially when you're trying to big up mass murderers if they're white. But nonetheless, it's just as well that he was an idiot, as is to be expected. If you buy into Islam, then you are, of course, by definition, an idiot. But 5 minutes to respond, I mean, the amount of people you could kill in that time, it would take about, well, it would only take a couple of seconds to slice somebody's trachea, as we see in far too many halal slaughter videos, which should be outlawed if the law was applied equally, but it isn't, because, hey, we've got to give special treatment to the Muslims for some reason, but you know how quickly it is that you can kill somebody, and therefore if they are densely packed and you actually know how to use a knife if you have any semblance of training or just intelligence, then you can kill somebody in only a couple of seconds. It, of course, take then a few more seconds to find the next target, but in 3 minutes, if you can only kill 3 people, in 5 minutes rather, if you can only kill 3 people and injure 3 more, then you're doing a shit job. So it is just as well that the war against the Islamic fundamentalists, I'm not going to call them extremists because they are fundamentalists, they are actually understanding exactly what the Quran says. It's just as well that they are incredibly stupid and therefore can be stopped by a rugby tackle, of all things. But if any of these individuals were to be able to be armed, let's say the terrorist was as well, let's say the terrorist bought a gun instead, which is illegal, but so is carrying a knife outside, and wished to use that to kill people, then, of course, one of the other people would have thought, what the hell is going on here? They're aiming a gun at me. They forfeited their right to live. Bang, bang. Job done. Aim for 2 for the torso. That should incapacitate somebody. Go for more if you want. You're in fear for your life. Why not? Go to town. You're not responsible for them being alive at the end of the incident if they've already put your life in danger. So it's perfectly acceptable to do so. They forfeited their right to live. You should be able to just obliterate them as best as you see fit. Then nobody would have died, except for the terrorist, but he deserved to die anyway. He forfeited his right to live. Whereas instead of that, 3 people have died, 3 people seriously injured, and the terrorist got to live. I don't see justice in that whatsoever. And the response has been utterly appalling. With to say, oh, it's been terrible. And of course, Keir Starmer, the response just to say, oh, this is difficult and we must not draw sided politics into this. This is clearly just an unfortunate situation. I mean, the utter bullshit behind that is like, how can anybody vote for you after this to see that, yeah, you're all for mass immigration and you're all for so-called diversity and multiculturalism, which is resulting in people dying on a frequent basis because of these ideologies that don't fit with what it means to be British, and yet you're suggesting, let's not bring sided politics into this. Well, unless you haven't noticed, Islam is also a political ideology as well as a religious ideology, and it does not fit with Britain. They will purposefully, continuously attack British people because they are so-called infidels, and it will not work. So to try and say, oh yes, I know there's people who are clearly the indigenous folk of Britain, and whose parents have voted for Labour, and parents have voted for Labour, and parents who have voted for Labour, and so on. So, yeah, you should still vote for me and not draw party politics into this, is so ingenuous that it beggars belief to think that you can actually get away with such a thing given the situation that we find ourselves in. That at some point you've got to put your foot down and say, okay, cool, yep, Labour, we're for the working man, we're for the working class, we're going to go with unions and other ways to fuck up the economy because their ideas are shit, as socialists always are, but nonetheless, they're going to think of what is best for the British people, instead of, for whatever fucked up reason, they've thought that it is a better idea to appeal to Islamists. instead of Britons. That they seem to have just bought hook, line and sinker into going, well, yes, we must go with a mass immigration crowd, and not just from the European Union, but of course from the third world, particularly those Islamists. We've got to try and befriend them. It's like, do you not have any self-realization that when it comes to Islamists taking over, you will be the first on the chopping block? If you're the one in power at the time, then they are going to come after you first. How do you not realize this? But apparently they don't. But let's not suggest that socialists have any sense. So a friend of the suspect was saying he was a normal, genuine guy. Well, obviously he wasn't, not a very good friend. Doesn't really know what he's on about. Or he's lying to protect himself. Either way, not worth reading. So, as the response says, that Thames Valley Police said on Sunday morning the attack was now being treated as terrorism. What a shocker. And the counter-terrorism police in South East will be taking over the investigation. Speaking to reporters later, the force's chief constable, John Campbell, said lives had been devastated. Or ended, but added that there was not believed to be a wider risk to the public and there was nothing to suggest anyone else was involved. No wider risk to the public. I mean, let's ignore the coronavirus. You've been ramming down our throat for a long time, but now it's safe to go outside. Just be careful of those Muslim trucks of peace while you're out and about. That's why those concrete barriers there, the anti-Islam barriers, is called concrete. He added, I am sure we would all want to recognise the bravery of those police officers responding, but also that a number of members of the public were helping my officers and the victims in what was a very distressing scene. Yes, exactly. So why don't you let people actually be able to defend themselves, and they wouldn't have to worry about helping the officers and then helping people who were dying, bleeding out, and then actually died because of your inaction, because of the lack of law allowing people to defend themselves. Because instead of that, you're disarming law-abiding citizens, and you're empowering criminals. You're empowering terrorists. You're empowering people who wish to kill people instead of allowing people to defend themselves. We've seen exactly the same when it comes to Florida or Kentucky, when you're talking about women being raped or houses being burgled. That when it was published how many women were actually trained to use a firearm, the amount of rapes in the following month after this had been published dropped by 92%. Yes, when rapists realised they would actually get shot because women could defend themselves, it dropped by 92%. And with home burglaries, when it came to realising just how many homeowners had guns and were willing to use them, they dropped by 60%. It's phenomenal. When people realise that, maybe there are consequences for my actions, and if I try to take advantage of people, I will be killed, they tend to not do it. So maybe, if instead of saying, we must disarm people, it's terrible, and therefore, aren't we doing a good job that nobody is armed, that then somebody's going to slip through the net and be able to cause this havoc. Instead, if you said, people are allowed to defend themselves, and if somebody is attacking them, attacking their friends, attacking the public, and they're using defense in order to stop this attack, they will be encouraged and branded as a hero instead of reprimanded and imprisoned for breaking the law, then we might see a decrease in this. Police cannot be everywhere. That is a simple matter of fact. So if you want to stop the crime, instead what you've got to do is change the society. And if, as a media, you wish to do your job in order to keep people safe, what you've got to do is in order to empower people and therefore embrace the times when they do act as heroes and stop people from attacking. Not suggesting that people don't need weapons in order to defend themselves from armed attackers, especially on the off chance that they are actually trained. And thankfully, this idiot cunt wasn't trained and was just an utter dolt in the entire proceeding, which is incredibly bloody lucky, and we won't be this lucky the whole time. So maybe it's about time we allow people to defend themselves, in which case you wouldn't get this again. He tries to bring out a knife, he tries to attack somebody, he's going to get shot by half a dozen people. He's going to die, and good riddance to him. Instead, 3 people died, 3 more injured, police took 5 minutes to respond. That is unacceptable. No chance. If you're allowing these people in, if you're allowing mass immigration, if you're allowing a foreign ideology that intends to rip Britain apart and evoke some other way of living, and you don't allow the indigenous folk to defend themselves, then what the fuck do you expect? This is where insurrection comes from. You're not doing your job as police, you're not allowing people to defend themselves, then of course they're going to take matters into their own hands because you're not allowing them to otherwise, and you're not giving them the level of protection that they pay for. Tax is mandatory. If you don't pay, you go to prison. You lose your freedom if you don't. But then what the fuck is your tax going for if you die despite paying those taxes because you're supposed to be paying for your own protection and those around you? It's utter bullshit. This is where a revolution comes from. You're inviting fifth columnists into the country and not allowing the indigenous folk to protect themselves. what do you expect? There is no other outcome. So, yeah, I'm sure we're going to have plenty of reports of people, oh, they just lost their guns in the river. It's untraceable. I couldn't possibly find it. Who knows? Oh, you're coming to investigate? I don't advise that, because I'm still buying ammo for some reason. That's where things are going to end up. And, of course, if Black Lives Matter tries to take advantage of the situation, then they're all going to get shot as well, and good riddance to the communists as well. They can fuck off. But that's where we stand. So, unless the Conservatives actually wish to be right-wing for once, and encourage individual freedoms, then it's only going to deteriorate. And if you don't allow it to be done by law, but you still let people die, it seems almost legally, through the methods that you put in place, then people are going to think, do I want to abide by the law and avoid a few years in prison, or actually save my life and those I love? I think I'm going to protect the lives of the ones I love, and then face prison if possible, but I'm probably going to defend myself and therefore die by police instead. That is what you're going to see, and I guarantee it. We've seen this time and time again, and it's going to happen again here. If you wish to avoid civil war, either protect people, as you're supposed to, or allow people to protect themselves. There is no middle ground of letting people in to destroy your country and not allow people to defend themselves and just instead watching them die. It's your choice. Make a good one. But to everybody else, as always, try and stay safe. Keep yourself safe as best you can. Obviously, grappling is a good idea, especially if someone's got a weapon, then you're able to control it. But most importantly, have a good one.